Hello friends, you've stumbled across a short clip from the Daily Switch 2 podcast, which, believe it or not, is a podcast that is about the Switch 2 with new episodes released daily. What will they think of next?
Sega have published 4 games so far, the 3 launch titles that we covered, and Raidou Remastered. It's a Shin Megami Tensei adjacent title I'll be covering in my next episode that reviews the games from after the launch day through to August. They charge $50 for the base version of each game except Puyo Puyo Tetris 2S, which is $40. But bear in mind that's a minor update to a game that Sega regularly sells on the Switch One for $20 or in a double pack with another game. It doesn't mean it's not an excellent game, by the way. Check out my full deep dive review on it. It just means that the price isn't as cheap as it might appear. But $50 then, that seems like a win against Nintendo's $80 games, and in some ways it is. But they were only able to do so by releasing on-game keycards. Would people have been as willing to pay $60 or even $70 for Sonic X Shadow Generations to have the full game on the cartridge? Well, some core fans like me definitely would have, but when you consider that the full game on Switch 1 is $35, or just $30 on PS5, a current-gen system, that $50 already might look expensive to many, and $70 would be disastrous. Kind of harks back to the N64 days when multi-platform games were almost always $15 to $20 more expensive on the Nintendo hardware because of the cartridge costs, and that was disastrous for Nintendo in that generation. Bear in mind that for Xbox and PS5, the Blu-rays cost literal pennies to reproduce versus $17 for a Switch 2 cartridge. That's going to increase prices no matter how you look at it. On the Switch 1, the cartridge costs were a fraction of that, especially if you could fit your game onto a small cart, which would apply to most indie titles. Sega's own Raidou is on a 16GB cart for Switch 1, but they either couldn't afford to or wouldn't eat the cost of using a 64GB cart for the Switch 2 edition. Unnecessarily, bear in mind. Also bear in mind that if released day and date, there would be pressure to raise the cost of the physical PlayStation and Xbox versions too, plus the digital version, because Nintendo have a history of not approving games being released on the Switch for more expensive than on other platforms, for example, mobile versions, presumably because they want to avoid that historical perception that Nintendo versions of multi-plat games are more expensive. And as we said earlier, they're trying to enforce their digital games costing the exact same as their physical ones. Another thing that I hate as a developer. For my own games, I feel like the digital version should be, pocket money prices, like maybe $7 to $15. But if somebody wants a physical version, I'll happily sell them one for $20 to $30. I think that's reasonable considering the extra manufacturing costs and things like that. But if somebody just wants to play digitally, I'm going to make the same amount of money if they buy it for $7 than if they buy the physical version for $20 or $30. So why not? It's just being greedy, in my opinion. The other thing that I must mention is the fact that it's $50 from Sega for the base games. Sega has a nasty habit of releasing digital deluxe editions, DLC, season passes, etc. So if you want all content, you'll actually end up paying far more. Sonic and Raidou both have day one DLC and deluxe editions available, so the full price is actually higher than the $50 if you want the full experience right away. And there is some controversy surrounding the seemingly excessive amount of this tactic that's being used with their upcoming Sonic Racing CrossWorlds game, with editions rumoured to be $90 or even higher. That's more expensive than Mario Kart World. I think these pricing concerns and the comparatively poor sales of their existing keycard titles might be why Sega have yet to announce any release details for the game on Switch 2, despite all other systems having a launch date and base price confirmed for the 25th of September for all other systems. I'm truly looking forward to this game, and I think it could be competition for Mario Kart World, so I really hope that Sega don't drop the ball too badly or try and milk the consumer's goodwill for the Sonic brand to recoup some of their perceived losses. It's worth noting that Sega are the third party with the biggest combined sales at launch, both physically and digitally. But this isn't surprising, really, given again what we've said about Nintendo's core audience, leaning both family-friendly and retro-enthusiast collectors. Most Sega collectors switched allegiance to Nintendo once Sega stopped producing hardware, and Sonic and Monkey Ball feel the most at home on a Nintendo system. But just because they sold the best doesn't mean they sold well. Don't forget that 21% of Switch 2 owners bought no games at launch. And out of those that did, 62% were first party. So while we don't know exactly who bought more than one game, we can assume that there's only a maximum of 30% or so of customers that bought a third-party title at all. And we know that Cyberpunk takes up a massive percentage of that because it outsold every first-party game except for Mario Kart. It's not a Sega game, by the way, but it's at least tangentially adjacent in my head because of 2K. So it's worth stating that Borderlands 4 is another major third-party multiplat not releasing day and date either. We don't know the reason, but these pricing decisions and the uncertainty as to whether enough copies will sell to even make it worth it certainly aren't going to be helping. Sega also don't offer any upgrade path if you already own the Switch 1 version of Sonic or Puyo Puyo, which I have heavily criticised them for, but apparently they will be offering that with Sonic Racing CrossWorlds, which tells me that they know full well that it won't be releasing on Switch 2 day and date, and they're trying not to lose out on Nintendo fans' sales by encouraging Switch 2 owners just to buy the Switch 1 version on release and then with the promise of an upgrade later. This might actually be a strong tactic to increase sales because we don't even know the upgrade cost yet, and again, like Nintendo collectors, Sega collectors and especially Sonic collectors tend to double dip. So most will probably buy the Switch 2 version in full once it releases, even after buying the Switch 1 version. It's cynical, but it works, and I'm guilty as charged as someone who often falls for this when it comes to both Nintendo and Sega with their core franchises. Again, there's something about 80s and early 90s brands that have taught our brains to want to collect things physically like the old days, which is less strong for PlayStation and even less so for Xbox. You could slap an Atari, Coleco, Intellivision, Commodore, etc. brand on something and there are a core amount of people that will just buy it regardless. I'm a little younger than most of those people, so for me that applies to Sega and Nintendo. Or indeed Capcom, Konami, SNK, Taito, etc. if it's retro-tinged. One of the most notoriously greedy third parties, EA, released a statement almost chiding Nintendo and saying that they had no intention of increasing their base price and following in their $80 game lead. Their launch game, Split Fiction, cost $50, and their announced Madden title is $70. The main difference there being that the cheaper game is a code in a box, ew, and the more expensive game is a keycard, slightly less ew, but still not great for $70. Neither is wonderful. Usually I'd prefer the keycard because you can resell them, but I mean historically there's literally zero resale for EA's yearly sports titles. We don't have a confirmation of the prices of FIFA etc, but I'd guess it's the same. Despite this seemingly cheaper approach, EA takes Sega's lead and run with it by offering a staggering $100 version of Madden. For those crazy enough to pay that, anyway. Plus, there will almost certainly be microtransactions and loot box shenanigans. There always is with the new versions of these titles, and it will be the same for FIFA. Sorry, I've just remembered it's no longer FIFA, is it? It's EA FC or whatever, or EA Club Football or something, because of licensing issues. I wonder if anyone will have already corrected me in the comments from when I mentioned it before. Go ahead, it's all engagement. Go off, King, pop off.
Well, that was funny, /sad, /informative, /stupid, wasn't it? Feel free to mentally redact to make that make sense with the clip that you just heard. I don't know what it was. I'm just recording a bumper. But if you enjoyed the clip, please give it a like. If you'd like to hear more, click subscribe, and you can find all the ways to listen to and support the full daily podcast at linktree/dailyswitch2. That's linktr.ee/dailyswitch2. Let's go! Did I sound like I mean that? I do. I really do.